Now, dear brothers and sisters, let us come to the issue of the Masnavi. Why did I speak about Ibn Arabi? I showed what? I firstly showed the ahadith, that the knowledge must be taken in our beliefs from the Prophet Muhammad and the Imams, peace be upon them all. I then showed how some within our community actually teach Ibn Arabi's books. They teach his books and charge for these courses, and they start mixing their beliefs with this stuff. I showed in Ibn Arabi's book his deviant beliefs, where he says that the people of Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, in his time are actually worshipping Allah because Allah decreed that he should be worshipped. So everything in fact worships Allah. So polytheism is worshipping Allah. And now we go to Masnavi, because some brothers said that some have been calling this Usul al-Din. So we'll show firstly an example of how we cannot take the Masnavi as our Usul al-Din. So firstly, one of the poems of the Masnavi, it praises Abu Bakr, the first tyrant caliph of the Mukhalifin, where it says, the eye of Ahmad was cast upon an Abu Bakr. He by a single act of faith became a Siddiq. So a truthful one. And this is on page 171. So if we want to call this book Usul al-Din or attribute it at all to our religion, we firstly realize that this book of Masnavi, this praises personalities who it is agreed upon in our school were oppressors of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And they of course were companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Yet we find that their actions in history prove that they were from the hypocrites of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So example number one is that Rumi's Masnavi praises Abu Bakr, and there's also praises for Umar that you can read in other poems. Does this go along with the teachings of Ahlul Bayt? Let us go to Basair ad-Darajat and see if this is the case. So we go to the book of Basair ad-Darajat, and this is an important work in reading about the merits of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and it speaks about some deep theological related matters. Let us go to page 309 and see a tradition here which is important in understanding the position of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam towards the first two so-called caliphs that the Mukhalifin chose to follow. So someone asked Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam regarding Abu Bakr and Umar. He says, قُلْتُ أَسْأَلُكَ عَنْ فُلَانٍ وَفُلَانٍ. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, the fourth Imam, Ali ibn al-Hussein, replied, قال فعليهما لعنة الله ماتا والله وهما كافران مشركان بالله العظيم. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, what did he say? فَعَلَيْهِمَا لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ. So we know from this narration that Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, the fourth Imam of the Shia, when he was asked about the first two so-called caliphs and tyrants who usurped the rights of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he swears by Allah and he says that Wallahi wahuma kafiran mata Wallahi wahuma kafiran mushrikan billahi al-azim, that they died as disbelievers and polytheists, associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. And as we know, they took the rights of Imam Ali alayhi salam, they usurped his rights, and they called people towards their obedience. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, of course it says Fulan wa Fulan, but we know who these are according to our narrations, states that they died on disbelief and in associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. And as we know, this is very clear, because if one dies without recognizing the Imam of their time, according to the famous hadith, they die a death of Jahiliyyah. They died the death of the disbelief, a pagan's death. And imagine if one person actually usurps the rights or fights against the Imam of their time, the legitimate Imam. So Rumi's Masnavi, this book, it praises Abu Bakr and Umar, yet we find the Imams condemning both of them. And this is known within the Shia belief, and of course they could not mention names all the time due to having to conceal the faith or save the lives of their followers from some of the tyrants. Now we go to a second example from the Masnavi, and we will just show a quote which I will not read out in the Farsi, because if I read this out in the Farsi as well, people will cut this clip. But this is the type of things within the Masnavi. If you just read you can pause and read the screenshot here with the translation of one of the poems. Now, dear brothers and sisters, we go to the third example. The first example, we showed how the Masnavi praises the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So we cannot take this as our Usul al-Din or say Usul al-Din. We showed a second example of some of the explicit type of poetry within this book. And finally, we take a third example, which of course will be X-rated. So if there are any children in the room, I advise you to either plug in headphones or take them out of the room, because this type of poem here, or story which Rumi writes in his Masnavi, is very strange and explicit indeed. And of course I didn't want to have to read this poem. However, some people and one good brother who I consulted said that this is a must and we must show people this so that they know the contents of the Masnavi. We'll also put up the screenshots as well so that you can see this yourself. Now, Rumi had a very wild imagination, and he spoke about a story of a donkey copulating, engaging in sexual intercourse with a woman, and he went to describe this story. So the title is up here, and this is an English translation I'm reading, but those who read the Farsi will be quite shocked maybe at some of the things which are being said in the language, and maybe even in the English translation it's been watered down as compared to the Farsi. But any of the Farsi speakers will know what I'm speaking about. So it's a story of the maidservant who had trained a donkey to perform the functions of a man. So the maidservant, due to the shahwat, the lust that she had, she trained the donkey to basically copulate with her. And as we know, some people actually do this. Unfortunately, they have no limits to their immoral lifestyles where they actually engage in intercourse with donkeys. So it says, her mistress discovered it but did not perceive the device of a god. Making a pretext, she sent the maid away to a distant place and had intercourse with the donkey and perished shamefully. The maid came back late and lamented, crying, "O my soul and O light of my eyes, you saw the cock, but you did not see the god." As I said, dear brothers and sisters, I don't want to have to read this, but this is to let you know what's in the Masnavi before people want to call it Usul al-Din. But you did not see the god, you saw the penis, but you did not see that other thing. Every deficient one is accursed, i.e. every deficient insight and understanding is accursed, for those deficient in respect of the outward eye are objects of mercy and are not accursed. So let's read some of the lines. We will not read the whole poem, but we'll read some highlights of this. So from me reading this, you've kind of got an idea of what Rumi is speaking about here. It says, there was a passionate, fun-loving maidservant who had taught a donkey to perform the services of a man. She had carved a protective flange from a gourd to fit on the donkey's penis to prevent his going in too far. So the woman here, in order not to end up dying, she made a type of device, according to Rumi. I don't know if this is a true story or not, if this is from his wild imagination. She made this type of device so that the donkey would be able to penetrate her and it wouldn't kill her, to fit on the donkey's penis to prevent him going in too far. And as we know, this has happened. Unfortunately, this was on the news before, that some people were engaging in these sick practices, and one man who owned a farm in America engaged in such practices, and he let a horse penetrate him until it killed him. So Rumi was speaking about this. Maybe this thing went on, but this also happens in present day, a'udhu billah. And it says, had the whole thing entered her, it would have destroyed her womb and intestines. And if you just want to look at some of the wordings which have been used, which I will not read in Farsi, I've highlighted in the red. So let's continue. The ass was becoming lean and his mistress remained helpless, saying, "Why has this ass become as thin as a hair?" She showed the ass, so the ass meaning the donkey, this is another name for it, or like for a mule, to the shoeing smiths and asked, "Why is the ass becoming so lean?" No ailment was discerned in him. No one gave information concerning the secret cause. She began to investigate in earnest. She became prepared to investigate at every moment. The soul must be devoted to the earnest endeavor, for the earnest seeker will be a finder. So far, what we've got from this poem of Rumi is that the woman wanted to have sex with the donkey, and she made this type of device so that the donkey wouldn't go too far into her. And then basically it says, after that, the mistress saw the maidservant sleeping under the donkey through a crack in the door. She saw what was going on. The old woman marveled greatly at it. The donkey, or the ass as it says, was treating the maidservant exactly as a man takes a woman. So it was copulating and doing this action with the woman. She became envious and said, "Since this is possible, then I have the best right, for this donkey is my property." So the woman, according to Rumi, she saw this happening and she said, look, if this maidservant is going to be penetrated by the donkey, then she is saying that she has more right because she owns it. It's her property. The donkey has been perfectly trained and instructed. The table is laid and the lamp is lighted. So it was trained for this. She's seen that it's already been trained and she must take it now. Feigning to have seen nothing, she knocked at the door of the room, saying, "How long will you be sweeping the room, O maid?" So she spoke the words as a blind, "I have come, O maid, open the door." She became silent and said no more to the maid. She concealed the secret for the sake of her own desire. So there was a type of voyeurism going on here, where the woman is watching, the mistress is watching the maidservant and what she was doing. She made her face sour and her eyes full of moisture and rubbed her lips, meaning to say, "I am fasting." So we won't read all of this, but it says, half finished and angry, its penis still moving, the donkey's two eyes towards the door expecting you. This she said under her breath and concealed from the maid. At that moment she treated her like innocent persons honorably. Afterwards she said to her, "Put the chador on your head, go and take a message from me to such and such house, so and so, etc., etc." So she basically saw it and she wanted her donkey. She was happy in anticipation of the pleasurable passion. She shut the door, saying, "Meanwhile, I have secured privacy. I will shout in thanksgiving." So obviously she is going to copulate with the donkey. From ecstatic pleasure, her vagina was singing like a nightingale. She was impatient for the flame of passion. Having reached the heights of excitement, it was no wonder she was feeling dizzy. So we'll continue and read the final parts of the poem. As we said, we're going to make it more brief, as it is a long poem. We'll read more of it, and obviously we just want the viewers to get the point, and inshallah ta'ala we'll explain that after. It says that she slowly pulled him into the house, the donkey, and lay beneath him. She stood on the same chair she had seen the maidservant use, so this is a mistress now. She raised her legs and the donkey penetrated her. His penis set her on fire. The donkey politely penetrated her up to his testicles until she died. The donkey's member burst her liver and tore apart her intestines. So, dear brothers and sisters, some of you might be asking, what was the point of me reading such an explicit poem? And I do thank you for bearing with me reading this, and I do apologize if some of this poem was a bit too explicit. Basically, we understood from it that, according to Rumi, a woman who was a mistress, she spied on her maidservant having sexual relations with a donkey. She then wanted to take this for herself, and she let the donkey penetrate her. And of course, after that, she died from such an incident. The point of reading this poem, dear brothers and sisters, was to emphasize on the point that, do you want to call this book Masnavi Usul al-Din? Firstly, of course, it praises the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, as we mentioned. Secondly, it has this type of explicit poetry. And thirdly, it mentions about donkey copulation with humans. If we say this book is our Usul al-Din, or we attribute our deen to this book, we would then be saying that our religion and beliefs revolve or relate to copulation and bestiality. This is the type of weird or sick mindset that Rumi had in some of these poems. Of course, we don't say the whole work. For example, there might be that some that say, no, these commentaries have explanations, there are meanings behind them. But again, these types of stories which mention explicit language as well in Farsi, which the Farsi viewers can read, and that mention donkey copulation with women, this is not something we want to attribute to our religion. So we conclude, inshallah ta'ala, in this video, dear brothers and sisters, and we say that when saying a book is your Usul al-Din, or saying that this, for example, is related to your religion, please have a look at some of the contents, lest you attribute a book and praise this book which states such things. And again, we know that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam left us with the pure source of knowledge. Therefore, it's not needed for us to go to these people with deviant beliefs regarding Allah Azza wa Jal and mix our beliefs with them, or teach courses wasting our time explaining the words of deviant Sufi heretics. Thank you for joining me, dear brothers and sisters. I see you next time. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum wa la'ana a'da'ahum.